Hands trembled in the cold earth. Fingers caked in mud scratched the ground in desperation, trying to reach the air that was just inches away. Beneath the surface, buried alive, a man fought against death as the soil pressed on his chest like a premature tombstone. It was the muffled groan that caught Tomas's attention. The 9-year-old boy was walking along the mountain trail, carrying dry branches for the week's firewood. His bare feet knew every stone of that steep path, every curve of the ridge that surrounded his small village. But this sound was new. It was human. Tomas dropped the branches and ran toward the groan. His heart pounded in his thin chest as his eyes scanned the uneven terrain. That's when he saw it, 2 hands emerging from the soil, fingers twisted in silent pleading. Part of a face appeared through the mud, lips cracked and trying to form words that would not come out. The boy fell to his knees and began digging with his own hands. The earth was compact, difficult to remove. Tomas pulled out the small knife he used for peeling fruit and began loosening the soil around the man's face. Each handful of dirt removed revealed more: an expensive torn suit, a gold watch on a wrist stained with dried blood. Who was this man? Why would someone bury him alive in such a forgotten place? Tomas dug for almost an hour. His hands bled, nails broken, scratching the earth relentlessly. When he finally managed to free the entire body, the man was semi-conscious, lips murmuring incomprehensible words. The boy grabbed him by the arms and began dragging the heavy body along the trail. Grandma Lucia's house was 2 kilometers away. Tomas stopped 3 times to catch his breath, muscles burning from the effort. When he finally arrived, he pushed the wooden door with his shoulder and shouted for help. Grandma Lucia appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on her worn apron. Seeing the man on the floor, her eyes widened. The old radio in the house was on in the kitchen. As Lucia cleaned the stranger's wounds, the announcer's voice echoed through the room. Businessman Ricardo Vasquez, owner of the region's largest wine company, was found dead in a car accident 3 days ago. The funeral took place yesterday with military honors. Authorities rule out any suspicion of foul play. Tomas looked at the man lying on the sofa. He observed the battered face, eyes slowly beginning to open. When the man finally managed to speak, his voice was hoarse as sandpaper. "My name is Ricardo Vasquez. My brother tried to kill me." The silence that followed was broken only by the radio's static. Grandma Lucia gripped Tomas's arm tightly. If this man was who he claimed to be, then the body buried with military honors was someone else. And the real Ricardo was here, officially dead to the entire world. Ricardo told his story between sips of water. His younger brother, Mateo, had always envied his success. When Ricardo discovered that Mateo was embezzling money from the company and tampering with products to increase profits, he confronted his brother privately. It was a fatal mistake. Mateo drugged him, took him to that isolated mountain, and buried him alive, replacing his body with an unidentified man from the morgue. Tomas listened to every word with wide eyes. He had never seen a wealthy man up close. He had never imagined that people with so much money could also suffer such cruel betrayals. But there was something in Ricardo's voice that sounded true, a desperation that could not be faked. Grandma Lucia made a decision. She would hide this man until they figured out what to do. No one in the village could know. If Mateo discovered that Ricardo was alive, he would come back to finish the job. And this time, he would leave no witnesses. While Ricardo rested, Tomas returned to the place where he had found him. He searched for clues, anything that could help prove the businessman's story. That's when his fingers touched something cold and hard in the soil, a mother-of-pearl button, the kind only very expensive clothes have. He put it in his pocket and ran back home. Night fell over the mountain. In the small room lit by candles, 3 completely different people gathered: a poor black boy, a widowed grandmother, and a businessman presumed dead, united by a secret that could cost them their lives. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Leave in the comments what you thought and which city or country you are watching from. Your participation is very important. Mateo Vasquez adjusted the silk tie in front of the office mirror that was now his. He smiled at his own reflection. Everything had gone according to plan. The body of the homeless man he found in the morgue was the same height and build as Ricardo. With the face destroyed by the accident, no one suspected a thing. The death certificate was signed. The inheritance was in the process of being transferred. The company, finally under his full control. He opened the drawer and took the pen drive he kept there. Inside were all the records of illegal transactions, accounts in tax havens, contracts with phantom suppliers, systematic tampering with wines to reduce costs. Ricardo had discovered everything. That was why he had to die. Matteo would not build an empire only to share it with a moralistic brother. The phone rang. It was Ernesto, his trusted man. The voice on the other end sounded tense. "Boss, something strange. I found digging marks at the site. It looks like someone dug long after we left." Matteo felt a chill down his spine. Impossible. He had checked Ricardo's pulse himself before burying him. The heart was weak, almost stopping. No one would survive that amount of earth on their chest. Still, the doubt nagged at him like a thorn in flesh. Tomas spent the next 3 days taking care of Ricardo. The businessman was weak, but gradually regaining strength. Grandma Lucia made hot soups and herbal teas she had learned from her own grandmother. The boy washed the wounds with warm water and changed the bandages made from torn old sheets. During the long hours of recovery, Ricardo told stories about his life. He spoke of the company he built from scratch, of his wife who died of cancer 2 years ago, of the loneliness he felt even surrounded by employees and partners. Tomas listened carefully. For the first time, he saw that wealth did not mean happiness. On the 4th day, Tomas made a decision. He needed help. He went down the mountain to Don Esteban's mechanic shop, a 50-year-old man who repaired the few cars in the region. Esteban had worked at the Vasquez company years ago before being fired. Perhaps he knew something important. The workshop smelled of burnt oil and metal. Esteban was under an old truck when Tomas arrived. The boy waited for him to get out from under the vehicle, then whispered, "I need to talk about Ricardo Vasquez." Esteban's face changed completely. He looked around to make sure they were alone, then pulled Tomas to the back of the workshop. What the boy told him in the following minutes made the mechanic sit heavily on a wooden bench. His hands trembled. Esteban revealed his own story. Years ago, he discovered that someone was tampering with the company's wines. He tried to warn Ricardo, but Matteo intercepted the report and fired him before the truth reached his brother. Since then, Esteban had kept copies of documents that proved the fraud. He was waiting for the right opportunity to expose everything. Why had he kept these papers for so long? What did he intend to do with them? Tomas felt a mix of fear and hope. They finally had a real chance to defeat Matteo. But they would need more evidence. Documents that were locked inside the company itself, in the private office of the new owner. Meanwhile, Matteo increased his surveillance. He installed new cameras throughout the property. He hired armed guards to patrol the surroundings. Something bothered him, a feeling that things were not as settled as they seemed. He called Ernesto again and gave a clear order: find anyone who has been on that mountain in the last few days. I want names, addresses, everything. Ricardo was recovering quickly. On the 5th day, he was already able to walk around the small house. He looked out the window at the mountain where he had almost died and felt something he had not experienced in years: genuine gratitude. That poor boy had saved him without expecting anything in return. That humble woman had taken him in, risking her own safety. They were people he would never have met in his previous life. Tomas returned from the workshop with Esteban. When Ricardo saw the former employee, his eyes filled with tears. Esteban hugged the boss he thought was dead and apologized for not being more insistent years ago. Perhaps none of this would have happened if he had fought harder to expose the truth. The 3 men and the boy gathered around the kitchen table. Grandma Lucia served coffee as they planned their next move. They needed to get into the company, find the evidence Matteo was hiding, and expose everything before he discovered that Ricardo was alive. It was dangerous, almost impossible. But it was the only way out. Matteo was also planning. That same night, he reviewed every detail of the murder. He remembered the exact location where he buried his brother, the amount of soil he piled on the body, the final silence before leaving. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. "Ernesto, I want you to go back to that mountain tomorrow. Take the dogs. If there's any human trace, they will find it." The storm arrived the following night. Lightning cut through the dark sky as the wind howled through the mountain trees. It was the perfect night for what they needed to do. Ricardo and Esteban prepared to enter the company while everyone slept. The security cameras wouldn't work well in the rain, and the guards would be sheltered. Tomas insisted on going along. Grandma Lucia tried to stop him, but the boy was firm. "I saved him. I'm going to finish this." Ricardo looked into those determined eyes and saw courage many adults didn't have. He nodded in agreement. The three left the house at 2 in the morning. The rain lashed their faces as they walked along the dirt road leading to the company property. Esteban knew a side entrance few knew existed, an old service door that led directly to the basement. Years working there had allowed him to memorize every corner of the place. The lock was rusted. Esteban forced it with a tool until it gave with a muffled click. They entered silently. The basement smelled of mold and old wine. Stacked boxes formed narrow corridors. They climbed a metal staircase that creaked with every step. Mateo's office was on the 3rd floor. They had to cross the main hall, climb 2 flights of stairs, and hope no one saw them. Ricardo felt his heart race. He was back in the place he had built, but now as an intruder in his own company. They reached the 3rd floor hallway. The office door had an electronic lock. Esteban pulled a small device from his pocket. Where had he gotten that? He connected it to the lock and waited. 5 seconds later, the light changed from red to green. The door opened. The office looked exactly as Ricardo remembered, but different. Mateo had put his own photos on the walls, removed mementos of Ricardo's deceased wife, and rearranged the furniture. It was as if he was erasing every trace of his brother. Esteban went straight to the safe built into the wall behind a painting. He turned the picture aside and began working on the combination. Ricardo watched from the window. Below, a guard patrolled with an umbrella, the flashlight illuminating the wet flower beds. The safe opened. Inside were organized folders, pen drives, a revolver, and a metal box. Esteban grabbed everything and started placing it in a waterproof backpack. That's when Tomas saw something the others hadn't noticed, a disguised door in the back wall. It looked like part of the wooden paneling but had a small hidden lock. The boy pointed. Ricardo approached and examined it. He had never seen that door before. Mateo had installed it after taking control. What was hidden there? Esteban forced the lock. The door opened, revealing a small secret room, no larger than a closet. Inside, cardboard boxes were stacked to the ceiling. Ricardo opened the first box and his eyes widened. Documents. Hundreds of documents. Fake contracts, records of bribery, bank statements from secret accounts, photos of meetings with people known for criminal connections. There was more. A notebook with hurried handwriting, as if someone was in a rush while writing. Ricardo recognized the handwriting. It was Alberto's, the company accountant who had died 6 months ago in an alleged suicide. The last page had a phrase underlined 3 times. "If something happens to me, the truth is here. Mateo threatened my family." Ricardo's blood ran cold. Mateo hadn't just tried to kill him. He was also behind Alberto's death. How many others had suffered at the hands of his own brother? A bark cut through the silence. Then another. The dogs had arrived. Male voices shouted commands below. Ernesto and his men were on the property, and the animals had picked up the trail. In minutes, they would be on the 3rd floor. Ricardo, Esteban, and Tomas exchanged glances. They were surrounded. The only way out was the stairway leading down, but the guards were coming from exactly that direction. Esteban ran to the window. There was a fire escape outside, but it was rusted and dangerous. The barking grew louder. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs. They needed to decide quickly. Ricardo grabbed the backpack with the evidence and threw it over his back. He opened the window. The wind and rain hit with force. The fire escape swayed dangerously. Tomas went out first. His small feet found purchase on the wet steps. Esteban followed, testing each step before putting his weight down. Ricardo was last. As he was leaving through the window, the office door burst open violently. Ernesto entered with 2 armed men. His eyes widened when he saw Ricardo alive. For a second, he froze in shock. Then he shouted, "He's alive. Get him!" Ricardo jumped out the window and began descending the staircase. The steps creaked under his weight. One gave way, and his foot slipped, but Esteban grabbed his arm just in time. Below, Tomas had already reached the ground and waved for them to hurry. Gunshots echoed. Bullets hit the brick wall near them. The staircase swayed dangerously. More steps collapsed. They were 3 meters from the ground when the entire structure began to detach from the wall. They jumped. The 3 fell into the mud, rolled, and got up staggering. Tomas pointed toward the back of the property. "This way. There's a river." They ran through the trees as the barking and shouts drew closer. The rain was so heavy they could barely see ahead. The river ran furious with the storm. Ricardo, Esteban, and Tomas reached the shore, gasping, covered in mud. The barking grew closer and closer. There was no way to cross by swimming. The current would have swept them away. They were trapped between the dogs and the water. Then a faint light appeared upriver. A small fishing boat approached, struggling against the current. At the helm was an elderly man with a gray beard. Esteban recognized him immediately. "Julian. Here." The fisherman turned the boat toward them. When he reached the shore, he shouted, "Get in quickly." The 3 jumped into the boat. Julian revved the engine just as the dogs reached the shore, barking furiously. Ernesto and his men appeared right behind, but it was too late. The boat disappeared into the darkness of the storm. Ricardo was confused. Who was this man? Why had he appeared exactly when they needed him? Esteban explained while bailing water from the boat with their hands. Julian had worked for the company for 20 years as a supplier fisherman. When Mateo took over, he was fired without notice and lost his livelihood. Esteban had warned him about the rescue, and he waited in the river in case they needed him. They navigated downstream for hours. The rain eased at dawn. Julian took them to a small port 50 kilometers away, where they managed to catch an old bus going to the capital. Ricardo wore a cap and sunglasses to avoid being recognized. Officially, he was still dead. The journey took 2 days. They slept in cheap roadside motels. Tomas had never left the mountain before. He looked out the bus window with wide eyes, seeing cities, cars, people, a world he only knew from his grandmother's broken television. They arrived in the capital on a cloudy morning. Ricardo knew exactly where to go, the office of Helena Cortez, a former federal auditor he had known for years. Helena was known for her absolute integrity and courage to confront the powerful. If anyone could help, it was her. The building was modern, all glass. Ricardo asked Tomas and Esteban to wait in the lobby. He went up alone to the 10th floor. The secretary nearly fainted at the sight of him. Helena ran out of her office, her eyes filling with tears. "Ricardo? But you're... how?" Inside her office, Ricardo told everything. He showed the documents, the pen drives, the dead accountant's notebook. Helena examined each piece of evidence with the attention of someone who spent their life investigating financial crimes. When she finished, her face was pale. The evidence was devastating. Mateo had not only tried to kill his brother, but had built a criminal empire using the company as a front. Helena picked up the phone. "I'm calling the federal police now. This will explode across the entire country." Ricardo held her hand. "It has to be public. Mateo has contacts everywhere. If we don't make this public immediately, he will disappear with everything." 2 hours later, Helena called a press conference. Journalists from all major outlets filled the auditorium, curious about what the famous auditor had to announce. When Ricardo Vasquez entered the room, silence fell. Then, an explosion of flashes and reporters' shouts. Ricardo approached the microphone. His voice trembled but was firm. "My name is Ricardo Vasquez. You saw me buried 10 days ago. But I am alive because a 9-year-old boy saved me." He gestured, and Tomas entered the room shy, frightened by all the cameras. The entire country stopped to watch. In bars, homes, offices, everyone was glued to the screens. Ricardo told how his own brother had buried him alive. He showed the evidence of corruption, money laundering, and the accountant's murder. Helena projected documents onto the giant screens behind him. Each page was a condemnation. Mateo was in his office when he saw the broadcast. He dropped his glass of whiskey. His eyes widened. Impossible. Impossible. Ricardo was alive. Worse, he was showing everything to the entire world. He tried calling his lawyers. The lines were busy. He tried his government contacts. No one answered. In minutes, everyone abandoned him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Federal police were already on their way. Mateo ran to the private helicopter on the roof. He had escape routes planned, secret accounts abroad, fake identities prepared. But when he reached the roof, police helicopters were already surrounding the building. Red and blue lights flashed below. There was nowhere to go. He went back down to the office. He looked out the window at the crowd gathering in the street. People shouted, held up signs, demanded justice. In a few hours, he had gone from respected businessman to the most hated criminal in the country. The door opened. Federal police entered with guns drawn. Matteo raised his hands. Cold handcuffs closed around his wrists. As he was dragged out, he crossed paths with one of his security guards in the hallway. The man looked away, ashamed. No one respected him anymore. In the evening news, all channels showed the same images: Matteo Vasquez being arrested, Ricardo alive embracing the boy who saved him, documents exposing corruption. The scandal was bigger than any in recent years. Helena ensured police protection for Ricardo, Tomas, and Esteban. Matteo had dangerous allies who might try revenge. But the truth was exposed. There was no turning back. 3 months had passed since Matteo's arrest. The trial was quick. The evidence was so overwhelming that even the best lawyers couldn't defend the indefensible. 35 years in prison for attempted murder, the murder of accountant Alberto, corruption, money laundering, and corporate fraud. No right to a reduced sentence. Ricardo returned to the mountain on a sunny morning. He was driving a simple car himself, with no driver, no bodyguards. He wanted to be alone for this moment. The dirt road took him to Grandma Lucia's little house. When he knocked on the door, it was she who opened, drying her hands on the same worn apron. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. Ricardo hugged her tightly, smelling the wood and soap scent that he would forever keep in his memory. Inside the house, Tomas was doing his homework at the kitchen table. When he saw Ricardo, he dropped his pencil and ran to hug him. Ricardo knelt to be at the boy's height. "I came to thank you. I came to thank you for giving me a second chance to live. Not just to be alive, but to truly live." His voice faltered. Tears ran down the face of the man who had long gotten used to hiding his emotions. Tomas also cried. Not from fear or sadness, but from something he had never felt before. It was relief mixed with pride. He, a poor boy whom no one noticed, had changed so many lives. He had exposed crimes, saved a life, and proved that courage doesn't have a price or a size. Ricardo opened a folder he had brought. Inside were legal documents. He explained that he was transferring part of his company shares to an educational fund he created in Tomas's name. The boy would have a guaranteed scholarship all the way through university. Grandma Lucia would never have to worry about money again. The house would be renovated, the land around it bought, and registered in their names. But there was more. Ricardo wanted Tomas to help him rebuild the company with different values. When he grew up, if he wanted, there would be a place waiting for him. Not as an employee, but as a partner. Someone who would never forget where he came from and why honesty matters. Grandma Lucia served coffee while they talked. Ricardo shared that Esteban had returned to the company as quality director. Julian had been hired as a supplier coordinator. Both received generous compensation for the wrongful dismissals. The company was being fully audited, all adulterated products were pulled from the market, and illegal contracts were cancelled. It would be a difficult restart. Many customers had abandoned the brand after the scandal. Investors had pulled away. But Ricardo didn't mind. He preferred to build something smaller and honest than continue an empire built on lies. He had learned that success without integrity was just a beautiful facade hiding decay. Helena Cortez also visited the house that afternoon. She brought news about the trial of others involved in Matteo's crimes. 6 executives were convicted. 2 politicians who had received bribes lost their positions. The system was far from perfect, but that victory proved that truth still had strength. While the adults talked, Tomas went out to the backyard. He looked at the mountain where everything had started. He remembered the day he heard that groan from the earth. He could have ignored it. He could have gone on his way. But he chose to stop, chose to dig, chose to help a stranger. And that choice changed everything. Ricardo found him there, looking at the mountains. They stood side by side in silence. Then Ricardo spoke. "You know what I've learned, Tomas? I learned that life can bury you in many ways. It can bury you in greed, in blind ambition, in loneliness, in fear. I was buried long before my brother put me in that grave. But you truly unearthed me. You showed me that importance doesn't come from money or power, but from doing what's right when no one is watching. Tomas looked at him, and you showed me that big people also need help. That everyone can fall. That everyone deserves a second chance. The boy smiled, but now you have to promise me one thing. Never forget who you really are. Never let power or money change that. Ricardo extended his hand. Tomas shook it firmly. It was a pact between two survivors, two people who had seen the worst of humanity and chose to believe in the best. When Ricardo left at the end of the afternoon, he waved from the car window. Tomas and Grandma Lucia waved back, standing at the entrance of the house that was now truly theirs. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in orange and pink. The story of a boy who saved a billionaire spread across the entire country. It became an example in schools, the subject of news reports, and inspiration for those who thought one person alone couldn't make a difference. But for Tomas, the greatest reward wasn't the fame or the money. It was knowing that when the earth tried to hide the truth, he chose to dig until he found it. Because in the end, truth is like a seed. It can be buried, trampled, forgotten. But if someone has the courage to unearth it and give it light, it grows strong enough to break any stone. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Leave a comment about what you thought and which city or country you're watching from. Your presence here makes all the difference.